This morning we're going to be talking about D6, environmental impact of some medication. So from D1 to D5, we've learned that there are different types of medicine. So although there's more, what you needed to know are aspirin, penicillin, your opiates, different kinds of antacids, and then your antiviral drugs. Now the HLs also learned in D8 that there are radioactive isotopes that we can use in nuclear medicine. So all of these medicines, making these medicines, using and disposal of these medicines could actually have an environmental impact, meaning it can be good for the body, but it may negatively affect the environment if we don't properly dispose these drugs. Okay, so let's start with three environmental problems with the use of our medicine. So the first problem is the problem of nuclear waste. Now, as else you haven't learned nuclear medicine, that's all right. But let me just summarize it for you so you have an idea. In nuclear medicine, we use radioactive isotopes. And these are atoms that are unstable so they degrade. And as these atoms degrade, they release different types of radiation, such as alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. So we take advantage of that. In medicine, we use radioactive substances, we ingest it inside the body, and then as it degrades, it emits radiation. And we can screen for the radiation and use it as a tracer. Okay, so we use it for diagnostic purposes. We also use these radioactive substances. We make use of their radiation right there to target and kill cancer cells. We call that radiotherapy. Okay, so it's good to use radioactive isotopes, radioactive substances, because the radiation, we make use of the radiation to kill cancer cells. We make use of the radiation to detect what's inside the body, so as tracers. So that's good, no problem, right? However, after the use of these radioactive substances, obviously there's still some radiation that can be emitted. So it can be both harmful to the body or to the environment. Products that contain radioactive substances could either fall under low-level wastes or high-level wastes. Now, the waste products from the use of radioactive isotopes in hospitals or in nuclear medicine fall under low-level waste. In other words, these waste products with these radioactive substances have low activity. It does not cause as much harm as the high-level wastes. Okay, and low-level wastes contains radioactive substances with isotopes with short half-lives. In English, it just means the radioactive substance emits radiation only for a short period of time. Okay? Now, items that have been contaminated with radioactive material or it has been exposed to radioactivity, some examples in the hospital are gloves that the nurses use or the technicians use, clothing, so clothing of everyone in the hospital or in the room, tools that are used, syringes that are used. So these are like poops from patients who underwent radiotherapy. Okay, so all of those could have been exposed to radioactivity. Because all of these materials has been exposed to radioactivity, we don't just necessarily throw them in the trash can. Okay, what we do is we store it until it is safe to dispose as ordinary waste. So we put it in containers because we're not sure whether the radioactive substance is still emitting radiation. So we wait until we know that it has fully emitted all of its radiation. Or some of these waste products are diluted with water or other organic solvents just to minimize the effect of radiation. Or these are the high activity, low level waste. They are low level waste, but maybe there's a strong radiation from these radioisotopes. We put them in containers and Well, they say some industrial or pharmaceutical companies dump it in the ocean. Okay, and therefore we can conclude that we are actually exposing our marine animals also to radioactive waste, which is not good. Okay, so the second type of nuclear waste is your high level waste. So these are waste products normally coming from nuclear reactors or nuclear power plants. So power plants or nuclear reactors, they use really strong radioisotopes that emit very strong radiation. And the isotopes normally have longer half-lives. Half-life just means like how long it degrades. So if it degrades longer, it means there's longer time for it emitting its radiation. Um, and waste products from nuclear reactors or nuclear power plants, they're really, really hazardous. Okay, in fact, the radiation can can stay for hundreds of years. So we don't want to expose us, or we don't want to expose the environment to these radiations. So how do we handle high level waste? Okay, so what they do is they liquefy the waste product first, like that, so you can contain it as a glass, and then you submerge it in a cooler. So this is a water tank, really large facility here. So you let it stay there. After cooling, you put it in dry casks like this, and then you store it there for hundreds, thousands of years. Now there's an issue because so if we keep compiling this, and eventually we're going to have a problem with space, right? So where do we put all of those waste products? So some people have been suggesting putting it out in outer space, let it float there in outer space. But again, we're doing this because the radiation is very strong. The radiation stays for a long time. And if you expose your body to radiation, you can expect mutation, you can expect development of cancer, you can even expect immediate death because the radiation is very strong. Okay, so that's the first problem with our use of medicine. Second problem is antibiotic resistance, and we are all familiar with this. If we look at the graph here, this graph shows us that through the years, okay, there's an increasing percentage of bacterial population that are resistant to medicine. Okay, this one is the top one, your Staphylococcus aureus. Okay, through the years, there's higher percent of them being resistant to the drug, the same as these other example of the bacteria. And we know it's called antibiotic resistance. So the drug antibiotic, which normally kills your bacteria, does not kill the bacteria anymore because the bacteria has developed resistance to the drug. Now, there are some possible causes for this. Number one is overprescription of your antibiotics. So doctors would normally just prescribe. So overuse of the antibiotics, the more we use the antibiotics, the more we give the bacteria a chance to realize that it needs to mutate and that it needs to render itself stronger than the antibiotic. So overprescription of antibiotics. Number two is non-compliance of patients. I am guilty of this. Maybe you are guilty of this. Normally, when the doctor gives us antibiotics, the doctor will say, take it for 7 days. Okay, but what happens to us, after the third day, we feel better. We don't take the antibiotic anymore. Okay, how is that a problem? That's a problem because you might have not killed all of the bacteria inside the body. So there could be those strains that are resistant to the drug, so they can keep growing in number. Then the third one, I'll talk about this first. Release of antibacterial waste. So how do we control the release of antibiotics in the environment? Miss, what do you mean? I take antibiotics. I eat. It goes in my digestive system. It goes in my blood. Eventually, some of it will go into my poop. Some of it will go into my urine, right? Because your kidneys degrade any Your kidneys filter your blood, so some of those active metabolites of your antibiotics can still be in your urine. Okay, you flush the toilet. Where does it go? To the sewer. Where does it go? To the soil. Where does it go? To the water table. So eventually it cycles back into the environment. And there are bacteria in the environment. And we're exposing them to antibiotics. And we've correlated already that the use of antibiotics is correlated to the increase of antibiotic resistance. Um, the last one here is use of antibiotics in agriculture. Now, this is bolded because this is the main cause of antibiotic resistance. Okay, you may think that antibiotic resistance is because we've been using it to treat different types of infections. Well, yes, partly, but its majority of the reason is because we're using it in agriculture. Okay, here's what do you mean. So over the past few decades, okay, we've been using antibiotics extensively in farming. So in agriculture, farmers will want to have healthy livestock. They don't want their livestock to die of infection or diseases, so they would give these livestock, cows, chickens, pigs, antibiotics so that their livestock will not get sick. Okay? So what's the problem with that? Well, this livestock, first of all, so it will, so you give antibiotics, right? Healthy livestock. So this eventually becomes our food. So the antibiotics can transfer if we eat this to us. If it transfers to us, there's bacteria here around our body. Okay, we're giving them, hey, here's a new antibiotic. You want to mutate? Or when we poop, when we pee, again, it goes back to the soil, right? And going back to this cow that's been overdrugged with antibiotics, this will also poop. This will also pee. So active metabolites of the antibiotics can go back to the soil. Soil is rich with so many bacteria. Okay, so majority of of our problem with antibiotic resistance comes from the excessive use of antibiotics in farming and agriculture. Okay. So because of that, there have been restrictions to the use of antibiotics. It's mentioned in your book in the late 1990s. It has been banned or it has been strictly limited. The use of antibiotics has been strictly limited. However, we haven't seen any immediate effect even after banning or after controlling the use of antibiotics in agriculture. There doesn't seem to have an immediate effect. So we are doing our best in medicine. So what we do is we restrict the use of antibiotics. Okay, you can't just go to the drugstore and buy an antibiotic. You have to have a doctor's prescription. And normally in the doctor's prescription, it says there how many tablets, what's the dosage, and then when you give it to the pharmacist and then they give you your antibiotic, they normally have to sign like this is fully served, meaning you can't use that prescription to buy the next time because it's been served already. So strict regulation the use of antibiotics. And okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. Waste must be reduced. New antibiotics, because there's antibiotic resistance, so we make new antibiotics. And we already know the problem with that, right? If we make new antibiotics, they catch up. So making of this new antibiotics is used under strict control. So we don't just encourage development and use of antibiotics. We regulate because we know that as soon as we have a new antibiotic, we expect antibiotic resistance to also increase. Okay. Oh, sorry. Why does it say problem one? That's problem two, antibiotic resistance. Problem one is nuclear waste. Now, problem three, this is very short. Problem three is waste products from pharmaceutical industry. So, pharmaceutical industry, we're talking about industries that make medicine. To make medicine, we use so many kinds of organic solvents. Okay, and it was mentioned in the book, like this one, benzene and chloroform. Right, chloroform. These are very popular choice of solvents in making medicines, But these solvents, once you expose the body to these solvents, let's say, I don't know, you accidentally ingest it can cause different kinds of cancers. Okay, and other chlorinated solvents also have environmental um, consequences. So examples of chlorinated solvents is in your book. So just think of an any organic molecule with the chlorine. Example is CCl4, that's carbon tetrachloride, chloroform, that's this, CH3Cl3, dichloromethane, CH2Cl2, trichloroethene, tetrachloroethene. So any organic solvent that has a chlorine, okay, these organic solvents present an environmental problem. Miss why? Because these organic solvents are volatile, meaning they evaporate easily. Once they evaporate, okay, they can, when you expose it to UV, I think we've learned this before, when you expose these solvents to UV, the bonds break. If the bonds break, then you have a chlorine radical, you have a Cl minus. This chlorine radical can easily bind with the ozone. So the Cl minus can bind with the ozone. So that's why it says here it's an ozone depleting agent. Okay? So again, the solvents are volatile, they easily evaporate. In the presence of UV, they split into something and the chlorine radical. This chlorine radical can start reacting with the ozone. And if it does, it depletes the ozone layer. Okay? And these volatile organic compounds can also contribute to photochemical smog. You know what a smog is? It's like smoky fog, and it's actually made up of chemicals. Okay? So that's our third problem. Waste products in pharmaceutical industry, because in pharmaceutical industry to make medicine we also use solvents, and these solvents are harmful to the body. These solvents are harmful to the environment. Okay, so that's why we have to practice green chemistry. So what is green chemistry? Green chemistry is sustainable chemistry. Okay, I'll just read it. It's an approach to chemical research and chemical industrial processes that seeks to minimize the production of hazardous substances and its release to the environment. So all chemists in industrial, in pharmaceutical, and in medicine, all chemists follows green chemistry. When they make products, when they manufacture different kinds of medicine, they have to make sure that they minimize the hazards. They have to make sure that they think of the environment and its consequence to the environment. Okay, so when you make a medicine, here the best synthetic route to making a drug, when you manufacture a medicine, first make sure that you use safe chemicals or safe materials that are readily available. Second, when you make medicine, you want to make sure that there's like minimum number of steps to make a drug. Miss why? The more steps you have, the more waste products you have along the way. Also, the more steps you have, the more solvents you need for the chemical reaction. And we have already talked about the dangers of using organic solvents. So minimum number of steps to make a drug, and then use as little solvent as possible, because these solvents can harm the environment, these solvents can harm the body. Okay. Then lastly, you have to make sure that you convert as much of your starting material to usable product. We've learned atom economy before. So let's say you have 10 grams of an acid. You have to make sure that your medicine is about 10 grams also. Like all of it can be converted into a product. If you use 10 grams and your product is only 0.5 grams, that's not good atom economy. Okay, we want to stay away from that synthetic route of making a drug. Okay, so to those who will want to pursue pharmaceutical science, so you will be learning these things. Okay, when you're making a drug, you want to make sure that your raw materials are safe. You want to make sure that making the medicine involves little steps only, so that you don't have to use a lot of solvents. You want to make sure that your starting ingredient can all be almost converted into a usable product, giving you close to 100% atom economy. So we'll end this lecture by a story about Oseltamivir. Okay, sounds familiar? Oseltamivir, we've learned it in D5. This is one of your antiviral drugs. So we use oseltamivir, if you forgot. We use it for influenza, treatment of influenza, H1N1, swine flu, bird flu. And this drug, so let me review you. This drug this drug works by preventing the virus from escaping the cell. So it traps the virus inside. Therefore, the virus cannot go out and infect other cells. All right. So to make this drug, it involves huge amounts of materials, a lot of materials, um, to just make some gram. So thousands of kilograms of waste products per 1 mole of the oseltamivir. So not good. Okay. If you start from scratch, you have to use a lot of materials. There's also a lot of steps. Obviously, there's a lot of solvents just to make 1 mole of your drug. Okay. Green chemistry will frown upon this. That's not a good practice. So what we have discovered is we can use shikimic acid from star anise. This is star anise. You may be familiar with it. You mix this with your food. It makes your food like red, and there's a particular flavor aroma from star anise. So instead of making oseltamivir from scratch, you start from a raw material, shikimic acid. So if you start from shikimic acid, there's less steps to make oseltamivir. So that's a good thing, right? Good thing, good thing. But then in 2005, during the bird flu, I don't know what grade you are in 2005, during the bird flu epidemic, so many people needed to take oseltamivir, this drug, right? There was a shortage of star anise because we've been manufacturing a lot of oseltamivir, so we have a shortage of this star anise. Let me just read this. Even starting from shikimic acid, 10 steps are required to make oseltamivir. So more work is required to make the synthesis even greener. So there's still 10 steps. And there was a shortage during the epidemic. So it's not ideal to use star anise, right? There might be a better way. So biology to the rescue. We've already learned that we can genetically modify organisms. Okay, so what they did was they genetically modified this bacteria so that these bacteria will start producing the shikimic acid. Okay, so problem solved. We don't have to harvest star anise anymore. We just have to harvest the shikimic acid from bacteria, and this is very ideal because bacteria grows really fast. And so meaning you can have more amounts of products produced per time. Okay, where you will utilize genetically modified organisms to make medicines for us. This is just from bio class. We've also learned in the past that we can genetically modify crops to produce medicine for us. So we can insert the gene in the crops, and then when we eat the corn, it already has the medicine that we want. All right, so that's all for D6.